Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Mark Green here from diabetesdietguide.com, bringing you all things diabetes, healthy living, weight loss, and improving your glucose control. Now, I've just finished a workout and I had an idea during it talking about calorie cycling and how it can actually help you lose weight. And the reason I had this inspiration is because the reason I was working out is because I know I've had a pretty bad time with my diet lately. I've not really been on it, but I've been compensating by doing an increased amount of physical activity. And actually this sort of built in this concept that I speak to a lot of patients about with regards to how to think about their diet. Because the conventional way of thinking is you have the same amount of calories every day and you adjust that based on whether you're trying to lose weight, gain weight, or stay the same. But it doesn't have to be like this. In fact, we can use dietary strategies where you might have a couple of low calorie days in the week to give yourself a bit of a kick, and then eat more normally on other days. The most common example of that is intermittent fasting. Done a video on that very recently, so check out the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. You can also do calorie cycling. This is where you change the amount of calories that you eat in a day, basically depending on what you're doing. So when you are more active, you might have more calories for that day, and on days that you're less active, you might actually have less calories. So you're cycling the calories day to day based on what you're doing. And this makes you really sort of tune in to your dietary habits and actually how this feeds into the bigger picture. So what I've done is I've used a trusty board here to just highlight some of this, using a typical Monday to Friday work week and how this made up individual might adjust their diet based on what they're doing. You can probably tell I've actually just worked out because I feel like I'm a little out of breath. So sorry if I'm panting a little bit. Obviously still got a bit of a post-exercise effect going on. So what we got here then, as I say, we got Monday to Friday. The top here we have calories in, calories out, but that is in reference only to exercise calories. So what have they expended through exercise? Obviously they're always going to be burning some calories just from their basal metabolism. And then we have the total. Now this made up person's maintenance calories is 2,000 per day. And their weight loss calories is 1,500. Now this is an interesting concept already because you can eat 2,000 calories, but your net intake could still be 1,500 if you're more active. So if you burn up an additional 500 calories from 2,000, you still reached your weight loss calories in a roundabout way because you've used up that additional 500 calories. So your net effect there would be weight loss. But what if you're inactive on that day and you still want to lose weight? Well, then you need to eat a bit less, because if you eat 2,000 or above, you're either going to stay the same weight or you're going to actually gain weight and undo the exercise calories that you did the day before. So on that day when you're inactive, you might need to eat a bit less. So in other words, we're cycling the calories a little bit. So let's use this example then. So Monday, this person's had 2,000 calories, they burned up 500 through exercise, so their total calories for this day is 1,500. Therefore, they're hitting the weight loss calories. Happy, good times. The next day though, they have a bit of an off day. There's some cake brought into the office. Although I'm filming this in COVID time, so actually that probably wouldn't happen because people aren't really going into the office. Anyway, I digress. So they have 2,500 calories on this day, not burned any up. So actually their net calories for this day is 2,500. So essentially they've undone yesterday's exercise. So if we stop the week at this point, this person's net effect on their weight is weight maintenance, because the average calories for the week so far is 2,000. And actually that's an interesting point, because this is how you should think about your weight and calorie intake if weight loss is your goal, for not just day to day, but week to week, month to month, and year to year. Ultimately it is the average of your calorie intake which will determine what your weight does. So just an interesting concept there. So Wednesday rolls around, and once again you repeat Monday. You know you're going to do an exercise class and it's going to be 500 calories, so you've again turn back the clock and you're now back in the weight loss zone because you've achieved 1,500 calories net intake. Thursday, you know you're not going to do any exercise on this day, but you compensate because you eat a lower calorie intake. So you haven't burned up any calories through exercise, but you still get that net intake of 1,500 because you cycled your calories on this day, so you're still hitting your weight loss calories. And then finally on Friday, you know there's a bit of a do, and you're going to have a worse dietary day, so very much like Tuesday. But this time you compensate by having a higher energy expenditure. Now don't get me wrong, 1,000 calories in one session is quite a lot. It's probably the equivalent of about an hour's run. or probably, I don't know, maybe an hour spin class as well. It's good going for most people. Like if you're fit and active, you could probably do this quite reasonably, but if you're not someone that's particularly active, this could be quite daunting. Nonetheless, it's just to highlight the point. So once again, you've hit your weight loss calories despite the fact you've had a big slip on your diet. Now in reality, 2,500 calories as an intake isn't really a disaster in terms of your calories in the grand scheme of things, because if you go out for a few beers on a Friday, you have a big blowout, chances are you're going to have more than 2,500 calories. But these are just numbers to highlight the point. So actually you can see there's more good days here than there are bad days, and if you're having a good average, then actually you're going to be hitting your weight loss goals. So it's all about the average. So actually they've still been able to have a couple of enjoyment days, which is going to keep the diet more sustainable, because you can literally have your cake and eat it and still lose weight. Now where this becomes tricky is people that aren't particularly active, because suddenly the margin for error in your diet is much less. So it becomes much more of a chore to try and hit those weight loss calories, because suddenly you don't have the luxury of having 2,500 calorie days or the 2,000 calorie days. Most days then need to start resembling these 1,500 days. The alternative to get around that is you have a few 2,000, 2,500 calorie days, but then rather than 1,500, you really drop the calories to somewhere around 800, 600, really low calorie intake days to compensate for this, because you just don't have that luxury of getting out and burning up the calories like the rest of us. So that's a very valid strategy, and some that people use. And like I say, it's probably the most common is probably like intermittent fasting, the 5-2 diet. So there's lots of ways you can do this, but it's really just to get you thinking about the different ways that you can lose weight depending on your individual circumstances. So you almost work backwards. How active am I? What's my calorie intake? And then how is my weight doing in relation to that strategy? And then if you're not seeing weight loss, then just readjust, don't get disheartened, readjust, adapt, and then start again. And eventually, if you do it enough and you tune into it and you engage with it, you'll start to see weight loss results. And then the idea is that you can sustain it for the long term. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, seeing as on the Diabetes Diet Guy, one thing that I should talk about is if you are calorie cycling, then you should speak to your diabetes team or your GP or your practice nurse just to discuss if there's any considerations with regard to the medications that you're taking. Because if you're cycling your calories, you'll also be cycling your carbohydrate intake, and it's the carbohydrates that affect your blood glucose levels. And your medications may have been prescribed on the basis of what your glucose levels were previously doing before you made any dietary changes. Now, obviously, if you're then going to change that and do something else, then the medications that you're taking might not be appropriate. And in certain instances, particularly things like insulin, it can cause low blood glucose levels and be quite risky. So just make sure you run it past your healthcare team. And that's particularly important if you're changing the calories day to day. If you do a continuous calorie restriction where you're hitting the same sort of numbers each day, then they can adjust things like insulin to match that. But obviously, if one day you're having a lot more carbohydrates, so therefore you have a lot more of the foods that affect your blood sugars, compared to another day where you have a lot less, then you probably don't want to be taking the same insulin doses each day because you're going to get very different results. Now you can compensate with that with certain insulin regimens, like a basal bolus regimen, long-acting insulin mixed with rapid-acting insulin, which you usually take at meal times. That's quite flexible. But if you're taking something like mixed insulins, where you have a combination of both rapid insulin and intermediate-acting insulin mixed together, then it can become quite tricky. So you'll know these mixed insulins if they have a number in them. So things like Novamix 30, Humulin M3, any numbers in the name will indicate it's a mixed insulin. So especially if you're taking those insulins, speak to your healthcare team about it. So anyway, that's my piece. I'm gonna go and try and get my breath back, have a shower. I hope you found that useful, guys, and keep an eye out for any new videos that I'm publishing. If you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe, and if you do want to see when I've posted new videos, turn on the notifications. So we'll see you at the next video.